Hello everyone and welcome to FGO Blog and Photography. My name is Steven. Today I have a behind the scenes video which is basically I'll be walking through the process of prop making as well as lighting setup for the photography of a specific figurine. The star today is Jack the Ripper from Fate Apocrypha. This is a press figurine by Taito and it has already been released about 2 years ago, though I've only purchased it recently, like a couple of weeks ago. As for the figurine itself, this is a rather tiny figure depending on what you call tiny. 18 centimeters tall, not very large, but it is a good news to me, especially for the case of a press figure. I do not have to make my diorama or props too large, so it keeps the cost down. If you would like more details on the base of this specific prop, I recommend that you go back to my Marie Antoinette video. It is a lengthy one, 17 minutes plus. But the first half of it contains the prop making process. This is basically aquarium foam rock, artificial foam rock. Something like this. People use it as the background of aquariums, sliced into 4 halves, and repainted, spray painted. This is what you get. And then you can scatter artificial moss around or even glue them permanently with the help of glue, PVA glue or latex glue. Back in Marie Antoinette, there were 4 walkways forming across the entire landscape. Now I filled up the center or one of the walkways right here, the center portion, with a styrofoam block and covered it with plaster of Paris because I don't need an uneven terrain for this specific project. So if you're able to reuse your previous props, just modify it a bit, you can save a lot on cost as well as your time on working on a new set of props. The gravestones, they are 3D printed stuff as usual. You get all these layer lines, but depending how you make use of them, they can be a form of texture to add detail to your photography. They go through the usual spray painting process, and then I would hand brush them for additional detail for that old worn out look because of the graveyard being abandoned and it took a beating from environment. All of these are hand brushed with weathering paint as well as a normal mister color paint. And if you do your weathering right, you can create a very rusty effect look for the fence at the back there. So this fence right here, same thing, 3D printed, spray painted, and then I hand brushed the weathering effect to make it look rusty, environmental effect. For a graveyard, the setting right here is inside a very foggy forest. So you need to set the appropriate atmosphere, the mood for the scene. That is where the lighting part comes in, very important. This is the light I use. This is a tabletop LED light. The front of the light, there are 2 layers of tissue paper I taped on, acting as a diffuser to soften the light. I'll be using 2 of these lights for this Jack the Ripper. This is also a battery powered LED actually. I can tune the maximum brightness, and as you can see, there are actually 2 sets of lights. I covered off one of them because I only need one, and I can adjust the brightness for this one. As usual, tissue paper acting as a diffuser right here. And then the 4th one will be this giant strobe, about 80 by 60 centimeter I think. This one will act as the background to light up the forest. My forest is your typical printed fabric background, which is semi-translucent, semi-transparent. So when you place a large lamp like this behind from the fabric, it will light up a glow, a very nice glow, giving you a very nice background to work with. Now we shall wait for the night time to come in, and I'll directly show you guys how I adjust my lighting for this specific figurine. Alright, now that we are in the night session, it is about lighting, setting up the lights for the photography of this figurine in this diorama. Now that I have turned on 3 lights, a pair of lights in front for the figurine and the background light. we can't really photograph this the way it is because the lighting is too unrefined. So the first problem is her hand being right in front of her face. You have shadows directly on her face, not very desirable. And then the second problem is that with this second light right here, also in front, relatively in front of the figurine, her skin looks rather glossy, which is usually a problem with bryce figurines in general. They are not coated with matte coating. Not to mention that you couldn't see much of the details of her waist if you set up the lighting this way. So this is all about your angulation, the direction of your lighting. For this light right here, all I need to do is to push it to the back so that it does not hit her blade or her arm, casting shadow on her hand. Okay. So you see, as I push the light towards the back, the shadows on her face pretty much disappeared. When you cast light from the back of a figurine or any subject for the matter, this is called a rim light method. What the rim light method does is to create a very beautiful outline along the sides of your figurine or any subject for the matter. And for a figurine like this, a lot of her skin are exposed. We call it sexy. So when it comes to a very sexy figurine, a sexy subject where a lot of skin is exposed, you go for double rim light so that all of her anatomy, her body shape can be carved out nicely. You make use of highlights and shadows to do so. You can get very nice body shape. So for the light on the other side, I will do the same. I'll push it to the back. So currently, you have outlined on both sides of the figurine, but the front is dark. But as you can see, her belly right here is starting to form all the nice shape. Now the problem is that the front of the figure is dark. You throw in a third light to fill in the shadows. This third light has to be less bright, less intense than this pair of light. Rim lights are usually brighter. So the purpose of different brightness, the front light being darker, is that you do not want to cancel out the shadows directly. If the light from the front is too bright, all these shadows are gone. You won't get all the beautiful body shapes in the final photograph. It is pointless to do double rim light in the first place. That's where our third lighting comes in. This mini LED light. Right, so especially for this light, I can adjust how much the brightness I want it to be. So indirectly, this allows me to control how much shadow I want to preserve on the front of the figurine. This will reduce my editing work later, and I do not have to dodge and burn, do all kinds of local corrections with a correction brush, with the K brush in Lightroom to fix my shadows. This is why getting your lighting correct in the first place is very important. So now the figurine is looking good. We have shadows, we have highlights, we have everything. There's one last problem left, and it is about the graveyard itself. It is too bright. So what I shall do right here, I'll just use random objects and I'll block the light. As you can see, when you place an object in front of light, you cast shadows, which means you make certain areas darker, as you can see right here. So I'm going to make the background darker. Now I'm narrowing the spread of the light to only the figurine. Right? So now the light is hitting only the figurine. The ground in front here is still a bit dark. Yeah, you just block it with something. Yes, so now only this figure together with the tombstone in the middle is bright. All of here is dark. And you repeat the same thing for the other side. For a graveyard scene like this, you do need some fog to create the atmosphere. And I do have my own fog machine, though I did not use it to photograph this setup actually. I keep my fog machine mainly for video production, video effects if needed. The reason why I would rather add fog in Photoshop digitally rather than using an actual machine is because I do focus stacking a lot nowadays. And with focus stacking, you'll be stacking multiple frames in editing, and if each frame looks ever so slightly different, you are going to have a lot of problems later with artifacts, and the results will just be a mess. So for me, I will just go digital. One more thing is the fog machine. It is very hard to control the amount coming out from this machine, as you can see. So the final results in your photograph will not really look as good. However, if you are still interested in one of these fog machines, you can get one for just 25 or 30 US dollars. It is fairly affordable. Now that I'm done with the photography of Jack the Ripper, it is time to go back into the studio in front of a computer to post-process and edit the photos. Very important thing about the photography process, especially when you're using a dedicated camera, please photograph in RAW format, not JPEG, because RAW photos, yes, their file size are a lot larger, but they contain a lot of data. You will have a lot of leeway doing editing process in Adobe Lightroom, in any Photoshop software. Most of the time, the straight out of camera photos, I call it the SOOC photos, they are at about 70 or 80% of the full potential, especially in a diorama, in a specific scene where you want to achieve a specific look and atmosphere. Editing, color grading, Photoshop work, it is a main core, a main part of digital photography, so you will need to embrace it if you want to proceed further and get better in photography in general. Okay, moving on to the photograph, you are looking at the straight out of camera photograph of Jack the Ripper on the left. As you can see, the left photo, that is plenty good, but it can be better. That's the point. The problem with the photo straight out of camera from the left is that it looks more warm. The tones are quite warm, it looks very summery, it looks like a very nice day, good weather in a forest, and that is totally not what I want, because this is about being inside a foggy and haunted looking graveyard forest. So the colors need to be a bit cooler, a bit more bluish and greenish, and you do not want the background to be too bright as well, because it is not a warm day, it is a cold and foggy day. I'm not going to show you guys the full editing process to get the results on the right in this video, because the total length of this video will end up being too long. However, I did compile all the screen recordings. I sped it up by 4 times, so it is like watching a time lapse. If you are interested in seeing the full process, I do have something for you. It is in the link in the descriptions below. So you get to watch it actually, the full editing process. There are 3 stages. The first stage is the color grading, color adjustment, like what you're seeing on my computer screen right now in Adobe Lightroom. The second stage is optional actually, and in fact, not many anime figurine photographers that I know of that do focus stacking. That is the second stage. That is something I personally do to improve the amount of detail in the photograph, as well as being able to control how much background blur I want in my photos and how much foreground I want to be visible. That is my own unique workflow, but I included in the screen recordings anyway. Feel free to skip to the third step or the next step, which is to export these photos into Photoshop. Now this is also optional in a way that it depends whether you want to edit additional artificial effect into the photograph. Sometimes it is not required, but in this particular case, I want to add in fog as well as a flare effect. On her knife, this is a very anime style look to it. So as with the fog, you can actually use custom brush and achieve it very easily. Custom brushes, they can be found for free online actually, such as on brusheasy.com for example. You can find free custom brushes there. Just import it into your Photoshop software. Personally, I use Affinity Photo because it is my own preference. That flare effect is also done with a custom brush, very easy process. I just wanted the end result to look something like from anime. So this is optional and you might think it is not necessary, but I like it that way. So it is a personal style, a personal taste. So that is all about the behind the scenes of the photography process of Jack the Ripper from start to finish. I hope you are able to learn something if you are interested in figurine photography, in toy photography in general. What you learned from this video, hopefully you did, is applicable to almost every genre of toy photography, regardless of whether you are shooting anime figurines or Marvel and DC Comics action figures. The rules are very similar. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I shall see you again. Goodbye.